Building software is not like building widgets. You're not building something physical. You're using your brain to build something, and it's sort of a creative process. And your brain needs to work properly in order to be able to do that. If you've got stress, if you've got other things that you're thinking about or that you're worried about, your brain is not going to be free to do its best work. We didn't have the pressure of, quitting our jobs and needing to make mortgage payments or car payments or support our kids and families. It was whatever we were doing was what we were doing.
Welcome to the Product Market Fit Show, brought to you by Mistral, a seed stage firm based in Canada. I'm Pablo. I'm a founder turned VC. My goal is to help early stage founders like you find product market fit. Today, we have Mike Potter, co-founder and CEO of Rewind. Rewind is a backup platform for SaaS apps. The platform automatically backs up all your data on apps like Shopify, QuickBooks, and many others. Rewind is based in Ottawa, Ontario. They have about 100 employees and have raised over $60 million. The topic of today's episode is how to build a startup on the side. And we're not just talking about any startup, like some sort of side hustle here. Mike was able to, on the side, launch a startup that is now well on its way to becoming one of the latest Canadian unicorns. Hey, Mike, it's great to have you here.
Hi, Pablo. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into, all the details and the ins and outs of what it's like to work on a startup on the side, which I believe you did for about 18 months. Let's go back to the beginning. So, it's 2014, 2015. As I understand it, you're working as a senior product manager at a different company. You'd started a startup before that. And so my first question is just, while you're working as a senior PM of this company, are you in this mindset of, okay, I'm here for now, but it's just a matter of time until I come up with an idea and I leave the startup to be a founder again? What's your mindset, as you're working at this other place?
I think the first startup that I ran, it was a great experience, but I learned a lot in it, and it definitely took a lot out of me. I don't think I was quite ready to do a whole other startup at that point when James and I started working together. But I was definitely interested in just, having a side project and tinkering with something and, spending my spare time working on something that could become successful. There was really no interest in, quitting my job and working full time and kind of making some of the same mistakes that I made the first time, which was, quitting my job too early and leaving a really stable job. But at the same time, when you're a software developer, and you love building things, it's just natural to want to tinker on the side in the evenings and weekends and build stuff. And so, I approached James, I think it was in the winter of 2014 to do that and to start working on something on the side. And we actually had a whole other project that we worked on for about 6 months before stopping that and then moving on to Rewind.
So to be clear, it didn't even start with, a problem and, oh God, I got to fix it. It was more of, I want to do something on the side. You knew James was he your friend? And then you went to him and you said, hey, let's just start working on something.
Yeah, I'd worked with James at another startup in Ottawa called Accrue, and really enjoyed working with him. And I think in November of 2014, I emailed him and I said, hey, really liked working with you. Would you like to work on something on the side? And he was certainly open to that. He had tried that with a couple of people in the past as well. Just his experience was that they never went anywhere. You need to start with an idea when you go out to it. It's not just like, hey, let's work on anything. You really need to be solving a problem that you're quite passionate about when you get going on something.
When did the current idea of Rewind, right, this backup for SaaS apps, when did that come along, and really how? Like, what was the origin story for Rewind?
Yeah, so we're like 6 months into this other app that we've built, and it's not going anywhere. There's no customers. We're having a hard time figuring out like a channel to go to market through. We can't attract anybody to it. And, I'd seen that before in my first startup. I kind of recognized that pattern. And I said, like, this is not going to turn out well. I know what happened in my first startup. I don't want that outcome again. So we need to move on to something else. James really thought it was a good idea. So I remember like the conversation we had around that time was him saying, no, I want to keep working on this. I think it's got a lot of potential. And me saying like, no, like we need to find something else. It might be a good idea, but it's not necessarily a good business if you can't find people that'll use it and find a way to get customers. And then, so I suggested backups because I'm a big backups guy. I've lost data in the past. I know the pain that you get when you lose data. I've got a hard drive here on my floor that mirrors my Mac. And I remember telling him and saying, like, I'd really like to work on backups. I think, API based backups and what you can do in Amazon with storing data without having to really, build a lot of infrastructure is really sort of, game changers in terms of the backup space. And, we looked around and said, like, what can we back up? And, we're in Ottawa, Shopify's in Ottawa. This is, April or May of 2015. They're growing like crazy at that point. And he said, like, let's build it for Shopify. Let's see if people need backups for Shopify. So to validate that idea, we went onto the forums, we posted, we searched in the forums for people that were looking for backups. We posted messages and replies to those. We set up a quick little landing page where people could give us their email address to show that they were interested. And I think within a couple of weeks of launching that landing page, we had about 20 people that had signed up for our pre-access, if you will, before we had built it. And that was a pretty good indication that, we were onto something that was much, much better than the first idea, because now we've got 20 people that are interested in it, where the first one we built it, but we didn't really have anybody.
Before you built and launched an app, you'd mentioned you'd done some validation. What exactly did that look like? Was it did you get anybody to like pre-order it? Did you do a bunch of interviews with Shopify customers, or was it more kind of high level?
Yeah, I don't think we did any interviews with them. I think that would have been an improvement on what we did. We also didn't get anybody to pre-order it because when we launched it, we made it free for the first 6 months. So we launched in June of 2015. And the thinking behind launching it as a free app was a couple of things. One, we wanted to validate whether people actually had the problem, and we didn't want price to be a barrier to them validating that assumption or not. So we removed price as an option, which, there's a big debate, I think, online about whether you should be charging people right up front or not. The other thing that we got, though, was we got a bunch of 5-star reviews in the App Store from those customers. So although it was free from a monetary perspective, we didn't charge customers, they did provide value to us by rating us in the Shopify App Store, so that when we did move to a paid model in January of 2016, so about 6 months after launch, we already had, dozens of 5-star reviews in the App Store telling people that it was a great app, that they needed it.
You decided to work on backups, and you're doing all this while you still have a full-time job. And the other question I have for you is, you have kids, right? How old are your kids at that stage?
About 6 years ago, we're around 3 to 7 years old.
Okay, so you've got really young kids. You've got a full-time job. You're launching a brand new product. First question is just how much time per week, let's say, do you think you were putting into Rewind back then? And the second thing is like when, like which part of the day are you devoting to Rewind? How are you balancing everything?
It's a good question. I think, it was in the tens of hours a week, and it was mainly after the kids had gone to bed. So it was 8 to 12 to 1 in the morning sort of thing. Maybe occasionally waking up early and working on it as well. I think it's the most, as I look back on our early time there, I think that's one of the most impressive things about what we did, was just how long we were able to sustain that. We also, 6 months in, found 2 other friends who also happened to have worked with us at a crew, who joined us. So we were 4 people at that point.
All part-time?
All part-time. Yeah. Everybody kept their full-time jobs. So again, kind of amazing to find 4 people that are willing to put in hours on, evenings and weekends and spend time working on this side project. And it was certainly, really difficult. You worked as long as you could on it, and whenever you could. There was no pressure from anybody to say, like, you need to get this done by this time. Everybody sort of was in the same boat. Everybody's got families. Everybody's got other jobs that they want to do. And there was a bit of sort of indirect peer pressure of seeing the work that others were doing and pushing you along to say, okay, like, we're getting somewhere, these guys have worked on this. I'm going to work on this. And I know, like, that's something that James talks about a lot really early, when it was just the 2 of us. feeding off of each other and having one person do something and then feeling like, oh, I got to do something too. And then you do something and then you sort of feed off of that and you get a lot done. That certainly helped compared to, my first startup when I was working on it, like mainly as a sole founder initially, really different dynamic to have a co-founder there to help push you along.
Was there any frustration at the speed of execution, even if it wasn't directed like at each other, like, hey, you got to get this done by X time, just as a whole? Was it a benefit to not have the pressure that early on, or was it a detriment?
I think early on we were still wondering like how big could it be, because there was so many people, the feedback that we had really early was, so we talked to like another Shopify app developer in Ottawa, for instance, who said that you could charge customers $5 a month for the product that we were building. We talked to somebody who worked at Shopify who said that it was a good idea, but customers would never pay anything for it. And so there was still, I think, a question mark in our head around like, how big could it be? For the first few months, we added about $500 of revenue, like recurring revenue a month. So it's clearly not, you're not crushing it. You're not like adding $10,000 a month or something like that. You're doing well. And over time, that's going to build into a really great business. And maybe one day you can quit your jobs. But the early sort of indications that we had were like, it's $500. It's like, okay, well, that's not much. Yeah, we went from 500 to 2,500, like within, I think, the first 6 months. We increased our prices. We just kept increasing our top plan price. Like we just kept making it higher and higher and higher because we got these larger and larger stores that, we're like, this is ridiculous. We're charging some of Shopify's largest stores like $20 a month. We could be charging them $200 a month. So we just kept testing that higher price point as we went and as we grew.
Would you go as far as to say that there's an advantage to that? Like if you had gone all in and you were doing $2,000 a month, you might be like, holy crap, how do we, we need to get to 10 and 20 like yesterday sort of thing. When you're on the side, that pressure's it's not at the same level because you can kind of you can go at a different pace and it's not a huge deal. Like, is that a good thing, a bad thing? How did that play out?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, I know there's a sort of a debate around like what you should be doing, but in my, experience and opinion, building software is not like building widgets. You're not building something physical. You're using your brain to build something, and it's sort of a creative process. And your brain needs to work properly in order to be able to do that. And if you've got stress, if you've got other things that you're thinking about or that you're worried about, we didn't have the pressure of, quitting our jobs and needing to make mortgage payments or car payments or support our kids and families. It was whatever we were doing was what we were doing. And our first year in business, it went really, really well. So we sort of benefited from the success, but I think the success came because we didn't have that pressure. We didn't have, stuff that was weighing us down, and we were free to sort of stop and think and solve problems and say, okay, how else can we do this?
In the earliest phases of a startup, it's really not a company. Like a company is not the best analogy for it. It's much more about a project. It's about testing things out, trying something, and just the creation process, the discovery process of it all. By setting it up that way and removing this pressure of needing to turn a project to a real company, you actually get there in a better way because you get to treat a project as a project and not put in these artificial milestones and goals that frankly are maybe not a good fit for startup at that stage.
Yeah, I think that, treating it like an experiment is a really good analogy, right? You're not sure of anything, right? Like we weren't sure of our pricing when we launched it. Like we didn't know what the price point should be. We had one sort of local developer who told us that the price should be $5 a month. So we said, okay, that's our low end. And then we went, what more could you charge? We thought, okay, 3 times that would be a lot. So we went to 15. And then we thought, what's the highest you could charge that? And then we thought, okay, well, we'll double that. So our initial pricing was 5, 15, and 29. And, we just kept experimenting with that high end price point. And it went 29 to 39 to 59 to 99 to 199 to 299 to 399 to 499. Like, you just kept trying new things. We never looked at what we were doing as we have to make this work. It was, is this the right thing to be doing? And we questioned it like as we went. Like I said, we rebuilt the backup system. Like we wiped everybody's data 3 times in order to get to a system that we felt could scale up and scale out to handle all the load that we had. You know, if you had thought about that more as a company and trying to find efficiencies as opposed to an experiment, and be willing to throw out everything that you've already worked on for, you know, months of work and just say, okay, that didn't work, try again. I think that mindset was really important, or is really important as you go into it, because we still have that mindset, to be honest with you. I tell almost all of our new employees, I'm like, don't assume that anything that we're doing is the right way to be doing it. Like, you should be questioning everything. And if there's a better way to do something, we want to be doing that. We don't want to be doing something that we're currently doing just because that's what we're currently doing.
Got it. So it actually was almost built into the DNA and the culture of the company. When do you start talking to people about, okay, you know, either maybe it's time to go all in, or was it more of a conversation of, okay, guys, like once we get to this MRR or this many customers, then we'll go all in? Like, how did that discussion unfold?
It was more around the revenue. Like, we had a couple of key principles that we wanted to maintain, right? So if somebody went full time, first of all, we never thought we had to go all in. So there was really never a discussion point where we said all 4 of us has to quit our jobs at the same time and all go in at the same time. It was, let's try one person and let's see if one person can go full time. And we got our revenue to the point where, you know, it was more than what we would pay a full-time person. So we're like, okay, well, Sean can go full time then. Sean was the one that was willing to leave his current job and work on it full time.
And you were, to be clear, doing what, 10K, 20K MRR at the time?
Yeah, exactly. You're in the 20K kind of range. Like, you've got some basic expenses. I think I don't remember if we paid ourselves a small salary early on, just to, you know, here's a couple of dinners that you can do to, you know, take your wife or girlfriend out to make up for the time that you've lost, sort of thing. I can't remember if we had a couple of, you know, some small salary back then, but yeah, we get it to like 15K or so of MRR. And then you're like, okay, great. Like, that supports one person's salary plus all the expenses and everything. Like, that's good. So Sean went full time, and based on what you were adding, it's just basic math of like, when can the next person quit their job? And so Julian and I quit in February or I guess we quit earlier, but we joined Rewind in February of 2017. And then a couple of months went by, and now we're making enough money where James can join us, you know, and none of us had to take a salary cut when we left our old position. We could maintain our old salary on the new salary. And that became like a really easy conversation to have, especially personally speaking, with my wife, who, like I said, in my first startup didn't really work out all that well. And she was very, very hesitant to have me do it again. But I was telling her, I said, you know, it's not going to be a startup where we work 24 hours a day. We're actually going to be working less, because we'll work 9 to 5 in the real job and then on Rewind. And then we'll come home and we won't have to work in the evenings and weekends like we were doing.
That's a good sell, yeah.
Right?
Was there something about Rewind or the way you guys structured it? I mean, I get part of it is by the time you joined, it was a real affair, you know, with real MRR or whatever. But because a lot of people would say, okay, well, now I don't have this job and I'll go, you know, all in on Rewind, but I'm not going 9 to 5. I'm still going to do 9 to 9 or whatever, right? And so you made a conscious decision to like, no, like, I could do it in 8 hours. And that means your whole team obviously is going to work 8 hours, and 8 hours being an arbitrary number. Maybe it's 9, maybe it's 10, whatever, but you get the point.
Yeah.
Was it just a decision? Like, this is the way it's going to be? Was there something about Rewind that allowed it to be that way, where you didn't have to have a 24/7 situation with it?
I think, you know, we're influenced by the team at Basecamp and DHH and Jason and the stuff that they've written about maintaining that sort of work-life balance. We had also just spent 18 months working 2 jobs. So it wasn't, you know, I don't think there was a lot of appetite from our standpoint to say, like, look, let's keep that going, because that was working out really, really well. Like, you could see some of the strain that it was having on family life at home with the 4 of us. So when we went full time, it was really, you know, we were very explicit about that. And we said, like, we do not want this to be a 10, 12, 14 hour day kind of thing. Like, we were just doing that that was clearly causing some problems from a personal standpoint. Let's make sure that that doesn't happen. Cause that's number one is like, people can't get divorced running this, like starting this company. Like that was off limits for us to say that we want to make sure we're avoiding that, and making sure that you avoid that is, part of that is working 8 hours a day and making sure that people aren't taking time away from family and friends and stuff like that, and having a good personal balance. But I'd say that, the team at Basecamp was an influence. What we had experienced was an influence. What I'd gone through in my first startup was an influence. And we were very explicit about that when we started it, to say that, no, like this is how we want to run this company. We want it to be a great place to work. We want people to enjoy it. And to be honest with you, like there's a bit of, there's just this bit of counterculture at Rewind, where when people, do something, we kind of do the opposite, right? Like I think it takes a special kind of team to build backup product, which is, fairly boring, not machine learning or AI or anything like that. Like it's not the most exciting technology when you think about it initially. It gets a little bit more exciting as you start doing it at scale, and what we're doing in terms of 25,000, 30,000 customers. But, it's definitely its own sort of niche, and you have to be, I think, a special person to be able to want to work on something that's not the coolest technology. And so that counterculture sort of extends from the product into the company, where we do things that most companies don't do, where we try and work 8-hour days and not 12 or 14-hour days in a startup, where in the summertime we get every other Friday off and work 9 out of every 10 days during the summer, from the May long weekend to Labor Day. There's a lot of stuff that I think we do that's a bit different than what a lot of other companies are doing, and we're pretty proud of that.
That was great. A really, really great story of how you originally a friend and an idea, and you started working together fully on the side on really a project, an experiment. And actually the first one didn't work. And then you shifted over to the new experiment, which became Rewind, brought in a few other people, and had 4 people working part-time for around a year and a half, and consistently making progress each time, and deciding to stick it out part-time, and frankly pointing out a lot of the benefits of doing that. And now I've turned it into a 100-person organization. Like I said, that's raised $60 million. And as you mentioned, has 25, 30,000 customers. So it's quite an incredible journey, and only the beginning. So it was great to have you here, Mike. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Pablo. It was a ton of fun too.
Thanks so much for listening. If you want to see more content, check out pmf.show.